Hello guys and welcome to my channel. It is 2025 now, which means it is time to look back on 2024 and see all the books that I've read. So today we're going to be going over my top 10 books of 2024 with my trusty companion Void here. 2024 was not a huge year for me. I just started getting back into reading and I got really into it at the end of the year, but I still wanted to review some of my favorite books from the year. I have split it into nonfiction and fiction. I'm usually more of a fiction girly, so if you are too, feel free to skip through the first 5 books because those will be my top 5 nonfiction. Then we'll get to my top 5 fiction, as well as 2 honorable mentions at the end. I've decided to split it up because although I am more of a fiction girly, I actually read a lot of nonfiction this year. I wanted to kind of showcase that. So without further ado, let's get into my list. Starting off with my nonfiction, we're going to be going from number 5 up to number 1. Read a lot of different books this year. Thinking back to January is a little bit tough, so I have my trusty notes here with me. But to start us off at number 5 for the nonfiction, we have Mudpacks and Prozac by Murphy Halberton. Mudpacks and Prozac is an ethnography, and it blends narrative elements, ethnographic research, and cultural analysis to kind of look at the different types of healing methods that exist globally. Looks at the different healing methods used to treat kind of mental health, especially with a focus on people's physical appearance and how they feel about that. This ethnography was quite interesting to hear about all the different, stories and narratives and circumstances that shape mental health globally, and then in turn, how these different circumstances affect people's choices regarding what healing methods they choose to use. I thought that all of that was super interesting. However, it wasn't my favorite. It was a little bit difficult to get through at times, so that's why I've given it 3 stars. Moving on to number 4 in my nonfiction, we have Improvising Medicine by Julie Livingston. This is another ethnography, and it is looking at how medicine is practiced in Botswana, specifically in the only cancer treatment center in the entire country. Livingston experienced this hospital firsthand, and it's a collection of her experiences and the narratives of others. I thought that she provided great insight. It was truly tragic to hear about a lot of these stories. She clearly linked to and applied all the quintessential medical anthropology theories, which, if you don't know, I have a degree in medical anthropology, so that's why I'm interested in this type of stuff. But it was a little bit theory heavy for the average reader, which is why I've only given it a 4 out of 5 stars this time around, but it was extremely eye-opening and heart-wrenching. My number 3 nonfiction book of the year is Fresh Fruit, Broken Bodies by Seth Holmes. This is, surprise, another ethnography. You can clearly see that I am a bit of an anthropologist at heart. This ethnography explores the lives of migrant farm workers in the United States. Holmes kind of takes on the experience of crossing the border illegally and working alongside these migrant farm workers to understand the different types of discrimination and injustice they face on a daily basis. Health inequities faced by immigrants in the United States is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about, but have been wanting to learn more about. So this provided a perfect introduction to this issue that I've been interested in learning more about and engaging in an insightful manner, because he was able to draw from both his training as a physician and an anthropologist. He was able to offer insights that I thought were quite detailed and captivating. However, I have rated it a 4 out of 5 stars just because I did have some questions and concerns, I guess, about the ethics of him explicitly disclosing how this group of extremely vulnerable individuals does illegally cross the border without acknowledging his own privilege as a white man, to be able to do so with very minor consequences. Did bring it down to a 4 for me. Moving on to my number 2 nonfiction book of the year, we have Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. I had been hearing so much about this book for years before reading it, and I finally caved this year. It was actually the first book I read this year. It addresses some of the pitfalls of mainstream feminism, which is generally focused around white women and typically does not acknowledge the contributions of women of color, and the specific, intersectional difficulties and inequities faced by women of color today. Specifically looking at topics that I am super interested in, which are, violence, gun safety, food insecurity, healthcare. These are all things relevant to my daily life and work that I do. So I just felt as though this was a great opportunity for me to re-educate myself about feminism and how I can be a better feminist to support women of color around me. I gave this book 5 stars. I think that it is an amazing resource for white feminists who want to learn more about how they can support women of color. Although a lot of the information wasn't necessarily new to me, I think that the way that it is written conveys such urgency and is so powerful that it was inspiring for me to reread about some of the issues I know existed, as well as learn about issues that I had never even contemplated before. And lastly, my number 1 nonfiction book of the year is Carrie by Toni Jensen, written as a collection of experiences from Toni Jensen, who is an Indigenous woman. She is discussing kind of the tension she felt growing up, specifically related to violence, racism, as with her identity as an Indigenous woman, but kind of clashing with American society. This book was the most captivating, I feel, from all of the nonfiction books that I read. Jensen was able to highlight both the pain and struggle of living in a world that is shaped by historical injustice, while also highlighting the resilience capacity of the Indigenous people in general, which I think is super important to acknowledge and take that resiliency approach rather than just looking at the unmet needs. I had no notes on this memoir. It got 5 stars for me. I completely recommend this book, 5 out of 5. Having a snack break courtesy of my boyfriend, who brought back cake and cookies, and Void just left. Let's jump back into fiction now. For my number 5 fiction book of this year, we have The Chain by Adrienne McKinty. And without giving too much away, the book follows Rachel, a mother whose child has been kidnapped, and she's told that in order to get her daughter back, she needs to kidnap somebody else's child, hence The Chain. This was my first thriller that I've ever read. It was recommended to me by my mom. She sent it to me in the mail, so shout out to her. But I didn't really know what to expect, and I think that it was somewhat of a success. I was super interested by the premise, and the more you learn about The Chain, the more interested I got. I thought all of that was super interesting. It was definitely a page turner. My only complaint was that some of the dialogue felt a little bit teenage, rudimentary, young adult, in a way that kind of took me out of the plot. So for that reason, I've given it 3 stars. But as for my first thriller, I think it was still kind of a success. My number 4 fiction book of the year is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This was a book I read with my book club, and I am, for some reason, not much of a romance fan. I don't know what it is. I love romance movies. I am a hopeless romantic at heart. I'm a lover girl. For some reason, I just don't like romance novels. But I had to read it as part of my book club, but it's romantic comedy about 2 writers, and they were in, I believe it was Maine, somewhere up north. But anyway, they help each other through their writer's block, and they're an unlikely duo that, of course, fall in love. I have given this 3 stars, which, let me say, is high for me. As romances go, it was my favorite that I've ever read. So it gets 3 stars. So if you do love romance, I definitely recommend, and I think that you'll love it. It was a little bit different. It wasn't too romancy, but that's why it's still in my top 5. But I just am not a big romance person, but still had to acknowledge it because it was good for a romance. I'll give it that. My number 3 fiction book of the year is Outlawed by Anna North, and this was recommended to me by my friend Hunter. Shout out Hunter. It is a dystopian Western set in kind of an alternate universe. It follows a midwife who is infertile, and in this dystopian Western world, if you're unable to have children, you're pretty much worthless, according to society. So she joins a group of outlaws, and the entire novel is kind of a commentary against the patriarchy, gender norms, all that good stuff. And I have given this one a 4 stars from me. It was my first Western, so I didn't really know what to expect. I'm not sure that it is necessarily my favorite genre, but I did feel as though, despite what the Goodreads reviews say, I think that the author did a good job of discussing issues about gender norms and gender identity in a way that was relevant to the period. Some of the commentary about racism felt a little bit forced, I guess you could say. And the end did feel a little bit anticlimactic. I felt that more could have been done at the end, but that also might have been the point of the novel. But that's why I only got 4 stars from me, but I thought it was really good. It was a page turner. I couldn't put it down. All right. And my number 2 book, which this one was hard to differentiate between number 1 and number 2 for fiction. They both were so good. But my number 2 book is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now, if you know me, you know that historical fiction is my genre. That's my favorite genre of book to read, and somehow I had not read Song of Achilles yet. I don't know how, but it was finally time. It was my last book of the year, and I flew through it. It's the retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of Patroclus, who was the lover of Achilles. I breezed through this one. I thought that it was enthralling. The author was able to paint a picture with words. I did realize I knew less about the Trojan War than I thought I did. I was also a little disappointed that the horse was only mentioned once in one sentence in the last chapter of the book. Hopefully that's not a spoiler, but let me know in the comments if you also wanted more horse content in Song of Achilles. I really loved the author's writing style, and I gave it a 5 out of 5. And last but not least, my number 1 fiction book of the year is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Sorry, didn't want to butcher the name. This book went super popular, I feel like, a few years ago, and I just never read it. But then it was suggested again by the book club I'm a part of, and I was super excited to read it, and I absolutely flew through it. It was my favorite book of the year. It follows the life and 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo, obviously, but Evelyn Hugo is a socialite, a Hollywood icon, and it's set actually from her retelling of her life story, kind of a tell-all to a journalist named Monique. And there were so many twists and turns that I was just not expecting to happen in this novel. There were multiple times where I actually gasped. I cried. It was just phenomenal. The chapters were pretty short, really easy to fly through, but they also included kind of excerpts from tabloids and newspapers, which I thought was really fun. I love when a book is interactive like that, and it definitely kept me turning the pages. So that's why it also got 5 stars, and it is my number 1 book that I read this year. And before we say goodbye for today, I did want to give 2 honorable mentions of literature I read this year. That are in 2 kind of different genres. The first time I've read these 2 genres. So first I wanted to acknowledge Hedda Gabler, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, by Heinrich Ibsen. don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But this was a play that I read. This was the first play that I've read since high school, and the first play that I've read of my own volition. It was also recommended to me by my friend Hunter, and she lent me a copy of her book so I could read it. I flew through this in one day at work. It was so good. I didn't know if I would really love a play as much as I do love novels. I thought maybe it wouldn't be as immersive or interesting to me, but I was definitely immersed. I couldn't put it down. It's about Hedda Gabler, who's a newlywed. She's not happy in her marriage. There is discussion around love and gender roles, ambition, etc. It had a bunch of twists and turns that I wasn't expecting, especially the ending. For those of you who have read it, I was shocked. So I've given this 4 stars. It didn't get 5 for me just because I'm not used to reading plays for fun, I guess. So it was a little bit different. It took me a little bit to get into it, but once I got into it, super exciting. And lastly, I wanted to talk about Haikyuu. So Haikyuu was written by Haruchi Furudate. Hopefully I'm not butchering that one either. But it is a manga following Hinata Shoyo, who is a high school student. It's basically about volleyball. They're playing volleyball. And this was the first manga that I read. I read it with my boyfriend after we finished watching the anime. I just had to know what happened. This is said boyfriend who introduced me to Haikyuu.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And my boyfriend had read it, and he kept talking about how good the ending is and that it's one of his favorite endings of any manga ever. So I was like, okay, well, I have to see what this is all about. He thought that it would be a good first manga for me because I really, really love the anime. And he was not mistaken. It was so good. The paneling, the story, just everything fit together so well. I cried, I laughed. I cried more during that manga than I think any of my other books this year. But it was so, so good. Definitely one of my favorites overall of the year. Well, thank you for coming on this journey with me. Just to summarize, I'm going to put on the screen my star ratings of my top 5 nonfiction, top 5 fiction books of the year, my 2 honorable mentions. Let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, if you read any of the same books, what books you think I should read next. Just let me know, whatever you're feeling. I have picked my first book of 2025, and it is going to be The Tattooist of Auschwitz. As I have said, historical fiction is my favorite genre, so I think that this book is going to be right up my alley. I'm super excited to start it, but that's all for me today. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, Goodreads, subscribe here, subscribe to my account with my boyfriend. Those are all going to be linked below, but thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.
Hi, wait.
I'm gonna leave all this in.
No, don't.